Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we're going to be making chicken Madeira with mashed potatoes and asparagus and our 2 sourdough loaves that we prepped the other day. They are ready to go in. So we'll do our first one. This is our spinach feta loaf, and we're gonna have put it in my Dutch oven that's been heating up at 500 degrees for the last hour. But first we got to put it out on our parchment paper and score it. So I'm just going to flip this guy out from my banneton. Beautiful. Pulling up. And then I'm going to give it a nice, just going to do my little crosshatch kind of score that I like to do. There we go. And where does my... Remember, your Dutch ovens are very hot, so I'm going to put my oven mitt on. You don't want to mistakenly lift up the handle and forget that it's 500 degrees. Put this guy in my first Dutch oven. Let him put my lid back on, trap that heat in there. And now we're going to get our next one. My next one is just my standard sourdough that I do. I think I do have that recipe card posted. It's just a real basic sourdough recipe. 100 grams starter, 500 grams unbleached bread flour, and 375 grams warm water, and 2 teaspoons salt. Super simple, but delicious. We'll give this guy a nice score down the middle. I like to do a nice thick score so that it really bursts, and then we're gonna do just our little slits, our little decorative ones. And we're gonna put it in my oval shaped one. I find that the loaves go nice in the oval Dutch ovens and the rounds in the round one. Perfect. We'll put our lid on, and then we're gonna pop these in the oven at 500 degrees with the lids on for 20 minutes. Then we'll remove the lid and cook them another 20 minutes or so at 450. So, put it in. I grab my other one. Put it in as well. Whoops. Hey, Bruni. My dogs are always walking under my feet. Okay, and then I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes for our sourdough bread so that I don't forget to take off the lid. And now we can start prepping our chicken Madeira with asparagus and mashed potatoes. So let's start with our potatoes. I'm going to turn my water up over here so that it can start to boil, and that way I can get my potatoes in. So I've already washed my vegetables, so I'm just going to give a nice peel on them, and then we'll chop them up and get them boiling for our mashed potatoes. This, by the way, is a huge potato. It's like bigger than my hand. It's hard to grasp. I find bigger potatoes are easier to peel because you have to do less work. Perfect. You could also use like a Yukon Gold potato. That would also taste great with the chicken Madeira. If you've never had chicken Madeira before, essentially we're gonna sear off our chicken thighs, and then we'll saute up some mushrooms, and then we're gonna make a lovely sauce using, typically you would use Madeira wine, but I don't have any Madeira wine, so I'm gonna just use a dry white wine with some beef broth. And you'll simmer that, and it's absolutely lovely. There we go. And you serve it like, it makes a nice kind of gravy or sauce that you then serve over the mashed potatoes. And it will be excellent with our sourdough and some asparagus. And you also put mozzarella cheese on the top of it. It's a dish that you can get at the Cheesecake Factory. If you've ever been there, I do love it. It's a great dish. So let's get my potato skins out of the way. And we're gonna give these, I'm gonna do a kind of a dice up. I do them kind of small because I want them to cook up faster, but we want to have them all about the equal size. And this is going to be for our mashed potatoes for our chicken Madeira. There we go. And then we have our sourdoughs baking in the oven. We kind of got a late start on dinner tonight because my son had his basketball game. It was a tough loss, but still we could come home and have a good dinner. Pretty happy about that. There we go. Cut them down. I kind of cut them into thirds or to fourths depending on how big they are, and then I'll chop them up in kind of even sizes. You want your potatoes to be about as even as possible. That way they will get soft at the same time and cook evenly. Because if you've ever boiled potatoes too long, they can completely disintegrate. So you want to try to get them all to be done around the exact same time. This one's a really big one, so I'm gonna probably cut him into fourths. There we go. And then chop them down. Perfect. And I'm just using, this is an Idaho russet. I find that they make great, really fluffy potatoes, which are my favorite. If you use like a Yukon Gold or a new potato, they're a bit more waxy and kind of have more of a thicker potato. Russets will give you that really nice fluffy mashed potato. Let's get these guys in and we'll let them start to boil for our mashed potatoes. And then we can start with our chicken. Okay. Got our mashed potatoes going. I'm gonna get a nice get a spoon and give it a nice stir. Perfect. If you've ever wondered what the white film or stuff that comes up when you boil them, that's just potato starch, and it won't make your kind of potatoes stick together. Let's start with our chicken. I'm gonna turn my kind of saucepan, it's a really big saucepan, onto a high, like a 7 out of 10. We're gonna put a good serving of olive oil in here because I don't want my chickens to stick. So I need a lot more since I am using a big pan. And we're using chicken thighs. So I've got our chicken thighs right here. I'm gonna grab a little bit of salt and pepper. So we've got some just ground black pepper, and I'm just going to sprinkle a little over the tops of it. We'll add a little bit more once we put these in our oil. And then I'm gonna use a little bit of garlic salt for our chicken Madeira. So we're just gonna season it up, and we'll do more. We'll have more seasonings coming, but always start off with a little. Perfect. And we've got to wait until our oil is nice and hot so that we can start searing them off. While we do that, I'm going to prep my other vegetables. We have mushrooms and then an onion that we'll also be cooking up. To get my potato peels to go in the trash since we're all done with those. And then we'll have our asparagus that will roast in the oven once we take the lid off of our breads. So I'm going to start with my onions. I'm using a yellow onion. I'm taking off the sides, and then I just do a light slit through the middle. And I just peel off this big layer right there because this part of the onion is terrible, and I don't like to do the work to try to get all the brown skin off. So I just take off that last layer. It makes it a little bit easier and a little bit faster. Okay, I'm going to chop these in half, and then we're just going to do kind of a small dice on it. It's not a micro dice or anything like that, but just a dice, which means this is a pretty big onion, so I'm cutting it about 5 times lengthwise, and then 5 times the other way as well. Perfect. Let's see how my oil is heating up. I'll do my little water drop test and we'll see if it sizzles. So I just put in a little splash of water, and look, we got a nice sizzle on it. That means our oil is nice and hot. And you always want your oil to be nice and hot so it will crisp up and without it kind of sticking. So I'm gonna put my chicken thighs. I'm gonna start with them skin down. That way we can get a nice crispy skin on them. And we're gonna cook them about 4 minutes on each side. You could also use chicken breasts if you want. Chicken breasts work great. I just find that chicken thigh meat is a bit more tasty. I love dark meat when it comes to chicken and turkey. Okay, we're gonna now season the tops of these, or the bottoms. A little bit of garlic salt over the top. It's probably about a teaspoon, teaspoon and a half. And then again, we're gonna go over a little bit of black pepper, probably about a half a teaspoon for the second part. Beautiful. And we're gonna let these sear off, and then we'll remove them, and then we'll start sauteing up our vegetables in there. So I've got my onions prepped. I'm gonna slice up my mushrooms. I've got a pound of mushrooms here, or 2 8-ounce packs. You could buy pre-sliced ones if you wanted. I've already washed them up, so they're ready to go.
You have a question? Do you have any pork belly recipes?
Pork belly. I have done pork belly a couple of times. I did it like a pork belly fried rice once, which was really good. And then like a crispy Korean barbecue pork belly. So I'll have to, maybe next time I go to the store, I'll grab some pork belly and you can do that for one of ours. But it's not one thing that I cook often, I will say. Pork belly, I feel like, had a really big craze a couple of years ago, where it was like in everything, like pork belly tacos, delicious. But I feel like we're on it's kind of like died down, and I haven't really thought about it much since then. But it is so good. The trick with pork belly, though, is you gotta make sure you get that really crispy edge on it. And that's really was your make or break. Otherwise, it can be chewy and not great. And sometimes it's kind of hard to find. Costco, you can get pork belly, but it's in massive amounts. Even for our family, which we feed typically 7 to 9 people on an average night, their pork belly is huge. So I'm doing 8 ounces of baby bella and 8 ounces of white button mushrooms. Normally I'd probably do all baby bellas, because I like those more than the white button. But this is what I had in my refrigerators.
You have a question? Will you be making any gravy tonight?
I'm going to be making a Madeira sauce. So that's kind of like a gravy, but not a true gravy. We'll cook our chickens down with some beef broth and some white wine. That will be kind of like a sauce that will go over our mashed potatoes.
And what mushrooms do you like to use in your recipes?
I most of the time love to use baby bellas. They're my favorite, but it really depends what I'm cooking. I love chanterelles, but chanterelles are hard to come by. But I do a wild mushroom soup and a wild mushroom tart with chanterelles. But I can only really get those and when Costco has them and their like fall comes out. Because I don't shop at like Whole Foods often. Give these a nice flip. And then if I'm doing Asian dishes, I will try to use shiitake, because those are more traditional. So it really, if it's just a plain mushroom dish, I like baby bellas the most. We're going to sear off for a few minutes on this side now.
Okay. Which brand olive oil do you prefer?
Honestly, it's nothing special. It's Kirkland's olive oil, but that's because I go through so much olive oil cooking, because we are a large family, that it's reasonable. I think it's like $25, $30 for this big one, so it doesn't break your bank. but I go through probably 2 of these a month. So I don't want to spend necessarily more money on a really fancy one. Now, I mean, there's so many good ones out there that you can get for, like, if you're going to truly dip it with bread. If you're eating it fresh, like on a salad or with bread, then a really high quality one really matters because it's the taste. But with cooking in it, you're not really getting that much taste out of it. So this is just our extra virgin olive oil. So it's good, it's great. Kirkland, which is the Costco brand. But I do find Costco's brand of things are actually pretty good. They have pretty good quality. I've heard stories that they're really like a nice brand with just like an offshoot, but who knows whether that's actually true or not. Okay, you see on my potatoes, I've got a light wad of white foam here. That is the potato starch. So what I like to do is I'm going to get a paper towel and I'm going to blot off the starch. And this just gives for a bit more of a fluffy potato, a less sticky potato. And so I just kind of take my paper towel and go over it. You could also go through the process of rinsing your potatoes once you've cut them. But for me, I was trying to save time in the cooking process, so I already had my water boiling. But that makes, I find like if I really want, you know, to show up my mashed potatoes, I will rinse them, and then they'll be the fluffiest, perfect mashed potatoes. And that's for, I will say, for when you're using russets, because russets are a fluffier one. If you're using a Yukon Gold, those are already more starchy and waxy, so it won't make much of a difference. Simmer. And then I'm going to turn my potato water down just a second. And we can start prepping our asparagus. I'm going to pull out another cutting board. Well, you know what? I think I can make it on here. So with asparagus, you always want to cut off the bottom ends of it because this becomes dehydrated and they get chewy and fibrous. So I'm going to give them a quick rinse and then we'll cut them off. Don't think you're wasting your asparagus by not cutting it off. This won't be good. It will be chewy and tough and just won't taste good. So you really got to cut off about 1 inch from the stem, and that will make sure that your rest of your asparagus is nice and tender. It just happens when the asparagus have been cut and harvested for a long time. They lose all of their liquid down there and it becomes very fibrous. So I'm going to put my asparagus out on a baking sheet because we're going to roast these in the oven with our bread. And then I'm just going to give them a little dash of olive oil. You don't need too much. And then we're going to give it a light sprinkle of black pepper. And it's about 1/2 teaspoon. You don't need too much. And then a sprinkle over of garlic salt. Again, that's going to be probably around 1/2 teaspoon. And then we're going to just shake them back and forth in the olive oil. Woo! Always got an escapee. And then your trick is you want to kind of spread them out as much as possible so that they cook up evenly. If they're like resting on top of each other, you won't get them to cook up as evenly. There we go. And I prefer when I'm getting asparagus, I like to get the really skinny ones. I think they're better than the big fat ones. I give my hands a quick wash. And let's take our chicken. Beautiful, look at that nice golden crust on our chicken. Stir it one more time through. And what we're going to do is we'll sear this off and then we're going to put them on our tray and then we're going to cook up our rest of our vegetables. I'm going to check my potatoes and see how they're working. So my trick is I'm going to reach in here and I'm going to try to find my biggest potato And I'm gonna take my fork, I'm gonna push through it. If it doesn't push through, whoop, like that, see, it's very firm, they're not ready yet. Once your fork can push right through the potato, your biggest potato, then they're ready to cook off. Our timer for the sourdough bread is about to go off. So let's take off our lids and we can take a look at them. And then we'll be ready for the next part. So we had about a minute left on there, but we'll do this now so we'll have time to do the next step. So I'll pull that out in 1 second so you guys can look at it. This is our traditional. You see how it has that lovely pop? That's the spring you get from doing the cold proof in the oven. You won't get as nice of a spring up without doing the cold proof. So
the cold proof is in the fridge, right?
Yeah, that's in the fridge, not in the oven. I misspoke, sorry. And this is our spinach feta. So I do mine for 24 to 48 hours. I once left mine in the refrigerator for about 56 hours and it still turned out, but I've never done it longer. Okay, let me turn this guy down. And we're gonna take off our chicken thighs. We're gonna be adding them back in, so it's okay if they're not cooked all the way, because we'll be searing them off in our sauce, but we wanna saute up our vegetables first. There we go. Okay. I'm gonna add my onions in. And we're gonna let those start to sear. And I forgot to drop my temperature down to 450. So I'm gonna go back to my oven and drop my temperature down to 450 and put my timer on. So let me get sear these off. And you wanna do it in the nice chicken drippings because that's gonna add the lovely flavor. Big, 450, start, and timer. Got it set. Sorry about that. Got to do while I was over there. Okay, so we have 1 sweet onion cut up in here. Since we are going to be making this into a sauce, we are going to add in butter. We have a lot of chicken thighs. We have 8. So this is a kind of a double recipe. So I'm adding in a full stick of butter. But if you're just making it for your family of 4, it would just be a half a stick of butter. This is going to be kind of the sauce gravy base for the chicken Madeira with the wine and the beef broth in there. And this is what you're going to serve over your mashed potatoes. So it's going to be a nice rich sauce. So we're going to put that in here. I'm going to turn my heat up just to about a medium. I'm on about a 6. And we're going to cook it and we're going to sear these onions off. Beautiful. We're going to cook them until they start to kind of get, start to caramelize, which is turning like a yellowish brown. And that will bring, when they caramelize, it brings out their natural sweetness in the onions, because most people don't realize that onions actually have a lot of sugar in them. And that's why caramelized they turn brown, because it's literally the natural sugars turning to caramel, which makes them delicious. Get these. And what I'm doing is, as I've added the butter in, I'm using my tongs, and these are silicone tongs, which are like heat safe up to about 550 degrees. I recommend getting silicone utensils, especially if you're doing a lot of cooking, because you don't have to worry about them being exposed to the heat. But I'm using my tongs to scrape any of those chicken drippings off the bottom of the pan, because I really want that to come into my sauce, because it's going to add a really lovely flavor. There we go. Perfect. In about 5 minutes, I'm going to pop my asparagus in the oven so it can roast at 450 with the bread. Asparagus needs about 10 minutes at 450 to kind of cook. You cook it until it's got a vibrant green, but not before it turns like a brownish green. You want it to be nice and bright. That will be tender and lovely. Okay. Let's check our potatoes. See how we're going? You don't want to overcook your potatoes, otherwise you'll have mush. Okay, we still, you know what? We're about there at that. They need about maybe a minute longer until they're the perfect consistency. Okay, now we've got our onions. You can see they're starting to turn a nice brownish golden color. We're gonna add in our mushrooms and saute up our mushrooms. Mushrooms are like little sponges, so they're going to absorb up a lot of the butter in there as they cook, which is great because they'll have a lot of flavor and be absolutely delicious. So I'm gonna give this a nice coat. Perfect. You wanna just make sure you coat all of your mushrooms in the lovely butter and onion with the chicken drippings. Perfect. Okay, I think we are done with our cutting board right now and our peeler, so I'll move that out of the way. We're gonna get ready to drain our mashed potatoes.
You have a question? What kind of oil did you brown your chicken in?
What kind of oil? Olive oil. I don't heat my olive oil up to the point where it smokes. So I use it in there to fry it off, and then it's in here. I feel like it's just like a heart healthier version to, you know, a peanut or a vegetable oil. I use, honestly, this is the only oil I pretty much have in my house because I use it for everything. And it doesn't have a strong flavor, but I love it. Okay, my potatoes. I've got my little pop-up colander. I'm gonna go over there and drain them and then flip them right back into the pot because I'll just whip them up in my stainless steel pot. Perfect. Take it out. Okay, I've got my potatoes. You can see they're nice and soft. And then I believe in having mashed potatoes. You have mashed potatoes the way they're meant to be made. So we'll put a stick of butter in there. And again, this is going to be feeding 9 people. And there'll probably be leftovers. But we got a stick of butter and about 1/4 of a cup of cream to start with. And a nice dose of salt. So that is about, I want to say, a teaspoon of salt to begin with. We're not going to whip it yet. I put my butter in there. It's room temperature, so it should melt. But I want it to melt for a minute or two first before we add, I start to whip it, because you want to make sure your butter is melted. Otherwise, you'll get cold chunks of butter in there. So here are our mushrooms. They are sauteing up nicely. Perfect. And now we're going to add in our wine and some beef bouillon and some water. So you could use straight up beef broth. I'm using beef bouillon and water. Let me grab a measuring cup. And we're going to use about 2 cups of water. And then we're going to use 2 cups of wine, of white wine. If you had actually Madeira wine, which is where chicken Madeira gets its name from, you could definitely use that. So I'm going to start with my wine. I'm actually going to hold my finger over because my cork popped in there and I just don't want it to fall. But I'm going to be using the rest of this bottle. So this is about 2 cups of white wine, of a dry white wine. You could use Madeira or a port or a vermouth would work as well. Red wine doesn't work quite as well. There we go. And there, you can see it, there's my cork. Oh, it's in the vein. Sometimes you just get a wine that just, the cork just breaks right in half before you've even made it there. So I'm gonna Got my wine in there first. I'm going to just kind of saute it around.
You have a question? Can you skip the wine? And if so, what do you use in place of it?
So with this one, it's really hard to kind of skip the wine on it because Madeira is the thing. But you could use just double up the beef broth with it if you wanted to, or use maybe a little bit of like a balsamic vinegar in there might help with a little bit, just like maybe 1/4 of a cup, and then beef broth. It's kind of tricky. But from an alcohol like this standpoint, all of the alcohol in it is going to cook off, and you're just going to be left with like the flavors of it. So like the residual grape juice, I would say, because cooking cooks like what the heating process cooks off the alcohol. And then we're going to add in 2 cups of water and a big scoop of beef bouillon. You could use beef broth or bone broth if you wanted to. I just love to use beef bouillon. It takes up hardly any room compared to like the tubs of the broth, and it gives a bit more flavor. So I'm mixing that in, and then I'm going to add in my water. I'm going to give that a little thing, and we're going to let it simmer, and we're going to I'm going to go put my asparagus in the oven with my sourdough bread. And I'm just going to roast it underneath on the bottom. So at the 450, which is perfect because we have about a 10-minute mark, and I'll be 10 minutes here, but you can take a nice peek and look how beautiful those are cooking up. Okay, and I'm going to grab some mozzarella cheese out of here because we're going to top that thing with some mozzarella. That's the specialty part of the chicken Madeira. It has a nice cheese topping once you put it in there. Let me get up to a lovely simmer. And then I'm going to take a little taste to see how it tastes. Delicious. And what we're going to do is, now we have this is our kind of our sauce, and it's going to start reducing down because we're going to cook it over our high temperature, but I'm going to add my chicken in here as well. So that will continue to cook the chicken, and then we'll whip up our mashed potatoes. So I'm just going to transfer our chicken thighs back to our pan. Again, you could also use chicken breast with this if you wanted to. Those work out well. I just find that chicken thighs are just a nicer, more tender cut of meat. Beautiful. And then I just turn it down. We're gonna let these simmer in that broth for a few minutes while we make our mashed potatoes. Okay. For our mashed potatoes, we put in the butter and the cream and the salt, and now we're gonna give it a whip up with our things. I'm gonna whip mine straight up in my pan because this is an all-clad pan. It's stainless steel. If you have a non-stick coated pan, do not whip your mashed potatoes in there. It will ruin it. So just a word of the wise, but you could just put it in a bowl and whip it up that way. Give it a nice and these were 3 huge potatoes, but they made a lot of mashed potatoes. Give it a nice whip. And then I'm gonna taste it. I have a feeling I need a bit more cream. And a bit more salt. So let me grab a bit of salt. I used up almost all my salt in my container over here. And a bit more cream. I want it to be nice, fluffy. So I'm gonna add about another 1/4 of a cup. And about, another teaspoon and half of salt for ours. But this will be our mashed potatoes, which we'll put our chicken Madeira over it. And it's kind of like a gravy. It's cooking in there in gravy base. And we'll serve this with our asparagus and our sourdough bread. So we're on the final stretch here. Beautiful. Get them nice and fluffy. My kids do not like lumpy mashed potatoes. They have to be fluffy. But the trick to fluffy, non-lumpy mashed potatoes isn't necessarily how much you whip them. It's ensuring your potato is cooked all the way through. That's why I say fish in there for your largest potato chunk and make sure you can press through it with your fork. Your larger potato chunks are gonna be the ones that aren't cooked all the way, which will lead to lumpy mashed potatoes. So make sure that you cook them all the way through. Here is our lovely chicken Madeira. It's simmering in our broth. Now the best part about this is we're gonna take mozzarella cheese and over each one of the chickens, I'm gonna put a lump of it. You could use like the strips of mozzarella cheese if you wanted to, but I also find that just putting a little nest on it works just as fine. And the steam from the chicken Madeira will cook it through, sorry, and melt it. Perfect. This is, again, if you've ever been to Cheesecake Factory, they have a version of this on their menu, and that is absolutely delicious. So it's one of those things my mom, whenever I go with her to the Cheesecake Factory, she always gets chicken Madeira. I used about, this was about 1.5 cups of cheese, maybe not even, maybe 1 cup of cheese. This bag was already open. Okay. Let's put this on. We are almost done with dinner. We are just ready to pull out our asparagus. Okay, so let me clear up this area so we can put our asparagus and our bread out. I'm gonna put my potatoes right here. And it will be ready, and it smells so good. And then we'll show you guys how we serve it up. Okay. Bring this over here, and we can go look at the oven and see how it is cooking. Pretty sure we're getting close to our time. One of my kids' magnets. Oh, beautiful. I'm gonna pull out our asparagus first. You see how they have turned a vibrant green? That's when you know they're nice and tender. So I like to roll them back in the olive oil that they're cooking. This picks up any seasoning. And this is our vibrant, let's see, I'll get out of the light, but you see how the green really pops? This is what you want. If it starts to turn to a yellowish brown, you've overcooked them. So vibrant green. And now let's get our sourdough. I'm gonna get one more trivet for this, and then we'll grab our sourdoughs out. We'll do them one at a time. They're very hot, so that is one thing. Make sure you have good oven mitts. We're gonna grab my first one out. This is our traditional sourdough. And see, these oven mitts, they're shaped like bear paws, but they have a silicone coating on it, which is really good. My mom once made me oven mitts. She crocheted them. And they're great trivets, but if you grab them and your finger pops through one of those holes, it will burn you, and I have burned myself on them, but I love them. They're sweet. But, oh, lovely. And this is our spinach feta bread. Beautiful. Okay. Now the trick with sourdough is you don't want to cut into it for about 10 minutes after taking it out of the oven. I'm gonna grab my I have a cutting board right here, and then I will take them out so you can get a good picture, a good visual of them. I am a fan, I don't want my sourdough to get super dark because I like to eat it for several days after, and if you get it super dark, then it's kind of really crunchy. And this is the perfect because it will crisp up beautiful for our sourdough, like our grilled cheeses. And then let me get this guy out. Let's take him off. And this is our spinach feta. They just look absolutely beautiful. And now our dinner is ready. So I'm gonna plate it up and show you how it looks. And the beauty of this is we made this meal in less than like 40 minutes, just around that time. So we're gonna have our nice serving of mashed potatoes. And you're gonna kind of spread it out. Let me get a good, where's my good scooper? So we've got my chicken Madeira. So I've got my nice chicken thigh. You're gonna just put it over there. I'm gonna scoop up some of these mushrooms. And then use this tongs. We're gonna put our asparagus on the side, and then we'll serve it with our sourdough bread. Beautiful, easy, super simple, extra tasty. Well guys, thank you for joining us. We try to do live cooking shows every single day. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and feel free to send us a message or comment if you have a recipe you'd like us to try. Thanks again.